Latch the windows, lock the doors, and put the kids to bed. It's time for another episode of
Tales from the Garage!
Hey folks, the man with nothing to say is back again. I know I'm subjecting you to all these Halloween things before and after my videos. Forgive me. Even though I'll still be playing them after November 1st, and all those music channel things that end on November 1st, I nonetheless have saved in my DVR. So I can play them all year, and I can put them in front of every single video I do, but I'm not going to subject the people that watch my videos to that. Just until Halloween's over, technically. Now, for me, Halloween lasts well into November, but I'm not going to make you guys listen to any more past November 1st. So, not having anything much to say, I decided... I picked up a few new CDs. I don't know. I don't generally like to review things too early, you know. I did pick up, actually just arrived today, the Tangerine Dream Quantum Gate, is it? I'm getting confused with the other Quantum that they came out with. I think it's Quantum Gate. But I haven't even spun it yet. I haven't listened to it yet. I'm deep in my Halloween stuff and other, some other things. So no review of that for a while, I don't think. But what I decided to do here is because I want to do, I'll probably do this and one more video before Halloween or right on Halloween, and then get back to more normal stuff. To whatever extent you can see it, I've got my back shelf there, kind of stuffed with some Halloween things. Some are Brainy's there. He's been in my bedroom on the shelf actually all year. I never actually put him away. But I haven't been doing bedroom videos, my normal spot, so I brought him out here tonight. I'm just going to do some vinyl pulls and talk about them and, just hope that I don't accidentally pull out my Partridge Family or Brady Bunch albums, but we'll see what happens. Too easy. Some of these are just too, I have a lot of electronic and specific jazz artists and ECM records back there. I might have to swap that out for the more obscure stuff that I have, because, who doesn't know Body Love? This is one of the early, not one of the first Klaus Schulze CDs, albums that I bought, but it's, up there amongst the first, maybe half a dozen or so. This is Body Love Volume 2, actually, which they're very similar in terms of musical direction. There's a lot of upbeat percussion stuff on both of them, and strangely enough, the first Klaus Schulze things that I bought, totally by accident, turned out to be the things that didn't have any drums on them. And listening to them now, those albums, like Time Wind and Irrlicht and Mirage, for instance, I think those were actually the first three that I bought. So it's strange that the first three that I bought had no percussion on them whatsoever. I think they sound better now. I think they dated better because there's just something in the way that drums are recorded that very much ages a record. It's from the 60s, from the 70s. Just the way drums are recorded are very different. And these Klaus Schulze albums, now at the time that I got into him, he had about 9 albums out. And this is before his X album. I got into him, and X was the first album, which was his 10th album that I bought as a new release. The two Body Loves, I don't list them amongst my favorites. A lot of people do. I like the Mellotron work on here, but there's a lot of up-tempo stuff with the drums and the sequencers going. But in a lot of ways, it's you can hear that it's recorded in the late 70s. When was this from? I want to say 78, but I'm not seeing the date on here. This one was printed in England. This is an Island Records version. So you get the Island with the nice album covers. They're featured album covers. You even have Mirage right there. I haven't played the vinyl in years. I've had this on I've got at least 2 different CD versions of this. Oops, it's upside down. See, it's right side up on this side. That's the Island. This is more the kind of thing that if I were to compile some Klaus Schulze and I wanted to stick to his early stuff, which is my favorite stuff, his first decade, up until about 1980, actually. And I wanted to listen to stuff in the car. Something like Irrlicht is very difficult to listen to in the car. There's no rhythm, just like Zeit from Tangerine Dream, kind of. And there's a lot of subtlety in an album like that. And when you're driving around in the car with the noise and everything, that's probably not an album to listen to. So this is more like if I wanted to hear early Schulze, and I wanted to listen to something in the car because it's got a beat, because it's got a rhythm, this might be one of the ones I pick. It's typically got 3 tracks on here. Star Dancer 2, which I guess Star Dancer 1 was on the first Body Love album. 14 minutes and 15 seconds. Moog to Q, I think is how you pronounce it. Or Muget. 1315, which I think is the only one that doesn't have drums in it, which is probably my favorite track on there. And the first side has a 29-minute track called Nowhere Now Here. I like the way it starts off. It starts off quiet. There are drums there playing slowly, but then the rhythm picks up with the sequencers, and after about 5 minutes it gets boring for me. But I always stick with it. I always listen through. I always make a commitment to listen to the entire pieces and the entire albums. But on that track, Nowhere Now Here, the 29-minute track, there's some Mellotron there. I really dig the sound of the Mellotron on this. I do like this better than Body Love number 1, actually. So, I know I got a lot of Klaus Schulze in there, so I don't know if I should pull them or how I should work this in the future. I think I'm just going to end up pulling a lot of artists that I've already talked about. Not the specific album, but I've already done reviews of other albums of theirs. Like Keith Jarrett, I know there's a lot of Keith Jarrett in there. Let me just see what comes up next. I don't, it's ECM, of course. Here's one that they changed the cover of when they reissued it on CD. I love this album. Batik, Ralph Towner, totally unique. The only time he played with, so far anyway, the only time he played with Jack DeJohnette on a record, and Eddie Gomez on bass, just a trio. Recorded January 1978. To me, this is really Ralph's prime period. And so it's just got Eddie Gomez playing the upright. And I'm trying to think. I'm not sure. This may have been the first time I heard Eddie Gomez, but I'm not sure. I got this one fairly early into my ECM Jack DeJohnette association. Jack is on drums, Ralph Towner, 12 strings and classical guitar and piano. I had read at one time, many years ago, that this was his poorest selling album on ECM up to whatever date that was that I read the article. And a lot of people thought it was because of the cover. What you can't see is that the cover's mostly black, but there's little... it looks like it was a pink piece of paper that somebody just tried to color over completely in black. So with the glare and everything, I don't know if you're going to... Here you go. You can pick up a little bit of the pink there, I think. Now, when they reissued it, I don't remember what the CD looks like. It's not a huge improvement, but it's better than this. And the credits are on the back, which is pretty much the only thing to look at. So much for having an album to stare at when you're listening to. There's not a lot there. This, however, is this is to me, this is a hot album, and I guess it's Jack DeJohnette, who's a fairly aggressive player, especially in improvising. Side 2 does the title track, Batik, which is over 16 minutes long, and it's a little like jazz, a little theme that Towner wrote and came up with. He wrote all the compositions on this, but there's a lot of improvisation. The theme is just stated at times, and they go off completely on improvisations, including Eddie Gomez and everybody. And it's really intense. It's quite a drum workout, as I remember, as well as the next longest track is Water Wheel, which is over 9 minutes. There's 5 tracks on the whole album. Water Wheel is the only track that I've ever seen Ralph Towner re-record. So the other 4 tracks in this album are actually unique to this album. So there's not alternate versions. And Ralph is, very big in both his organ and solo work. He re-records a lot of his old pieces. So it's a little odd to me, maybe, that 4 out of the 5 tracks on here never got re-recorded. There's no alternate versions with different bands in there. There's a couple more avant-garde tracks, and I think it's Shades of Sutton Hoo is one track, which is 4.5 minutes, and a track called Green Room, which is about 6 minutes, and there's another piece, Trellis, and I haven't given this a fresh listen because I didn't know I was going to be pulling this out. There's a little more avant-garde stuff, especially when he brings in the piano. I'm going to go listen to this now, when I'm done here probably. It's very intense. With Jack on drums, it's a lot more driving than most of his more subdued works. And it's also a bit more on the avant-garde side. The shorter pieces on here tend to be a little bit more darker. I can see a lot of people not liking them, but for me, I put this amongst my favorite Towner recordings. Not counting the organ stuff, which there's just so many of, I have to keep them separate. This is definitely in my top 5 easily, and maybe even my top 3 of his albums. Just fantastic. I put Blue Sun up there in my top 3. If you want to count Sargasso Sea, which is a duet with John Abercrombie, I put that up there. Solstice stuff is really good. There's this is all from the same period, from really the mid to late 70s. He was really just mid to late 70s, even early 80s. He was just really tearing it up. But Batik is a fantastic album, and one of his lesser known ECMs. 78, did I say 78? recorded January 70. It's a fantastic album. You have to have maybe an ear for the more avant-garde stuff and be able to tolerate long tracks, because the main track on here is 16 minutes long, and the next track is 9 minutes long, and that more than makes up more than half of the album right there. So you have to really be into, I guess, listening to musicians improvising and coming up with stuff based on a theme. I'm just going to pick another one. I knew this was a twofer going for it because it's thick. Not an ECM. Ladies and gentlemen, West Montgomery Beginnings. This is a twofer, but it's not specifically a reissue of two albums. Rather, it's a whole bunch of different sessions from 1957, 1958, and 1959 that Wes Montgomery recorded really just before he started his solo career. They were appearances on other folks' albums that he did, including his brother. His brothers had a band called the Master Sounds, which included Montgomery on bass, Buddy Montgomery on vibraphone, and he also played piano as well. And so this was a compilation, essentially, of a whole bunch of tracks recorded on 1, 2, 3, 4, it looks like 5 or 6 different sessions, different time periods, starting December 30th, 1957, and going to October 1959. And some of them were with the Master Sounds, which was Wes guesting on his brother's band's records, and others were, seems like his brothers are playing on almost all of these tracks, but I don't know if they're all specifically Master Sounds recordings or not. But this was a after you get into Wes, this even predates his early Riverside material. But I think he started recording on his own in 1959. So just right around the time that this album ends, there's probably some overlap with when he actually did start recording as a leader on his own. His first recordings were done just as an organ trio with organ, guitar, and drums. But this has, I remember, I haven't listened to this for a while, and I don't have these recordings. This album was not re-released on CD in this format. You would probably have to go find the original albums that these are from, like the Montgomery Brothers and the Master Sounds, which I think was just another name for the Montgomery Brothers. Nice liner notes. I wish it had 2 pages of liner notes instead of just that one big photo, but they're quite small and there's a lot to read, and there's also liner notes do start on the back as well. Heavy cardboard. This is heavy. This is really heavy pressing. But his playing is slightly different there. Look at the Blue Note label. Wes always had a very warm sound to his electric guitar. But these early recordings, especially I remember the ones from 1957, he had a more aggressive, trebly sound. So if you're real familiar with his playing, it's kind of interesting to hear him play in that way. And that could just be the equipment and the settings and all that he uses on the guitars and amplifiers, whatever. But it's very interesting to hear him play with a slightly different tone if you're very familiar with him. And I gotta hunt these down. I gotta see if these are even. I would imagine these are in print on CD in some form. These 5 sessions, but I don't know. I'm not aware that they're put under Wes's name, so you'd have to go hunt down his brother's recordings, both as the Montgomery Brothers and as the Master Sounds. Yeah, and there's other people on here as well. Freddie Hubbard plays trumpet a bit on a few tracks. Harold Land plays tenor saxophone. There's any number of drummers. Pony Poindexter plays alto saxophone. Louis Hayes is one of the drummers. Benny Barth on drums. There's a whole bunch of musicians on here. Most of it's Wes with his brothers. And I'd like to recommend it, but I don't know how you would find these recordings. I guess you'd really have to look at some kind of online discography of Wes's, and I'm guessing anything that Wes recorded, even if the album isn't under his own name, is going to have his name on it. So, if you're looking at the master sounds of the Montgomery Brothers albums, they would certainly mention that Wes plays on them because he was the best known of them. Let me do one more poll. I always go to different sections so that I don't pull the same artists twice. This is a good one. Not on my top. Well, yeah, this is real good. Brian Eno's Apollo vinyl, $8.98. I bought it at an import record store, which is weird because it was. I bought it at Discomat. I got two different tags on here. Discomat was a chain that was here for a few years. But I bought my very first. One of my first Eno albums, or maybe my first Eno albums on. This is good. This is not so much of an ambient recording, even though it's been kind of put in that category. The pieces are all very short on this. There's 12 pieces on this album. The album runs about 48 minutes, it looks like. And there's one piece that's 7.5 minutes long, which is the final piece on the album. But apart from that, none of the pieces, the remaining 11 pieces, even hit the 5-minute mark. So it's really, not an ambient recording so much as, it doesn't settle down long enough to kind of maintain a mood. In addition to Brian playing on here, Daniel Lanois plays on here. Most notably, there's a couple tracks with they're really the standout tracks are the ones I think that Daniel Lanois plays the pedal steel guitar on, which is really pretty and really nice and very much in the forefront. And it might be only like 2 tracks on here. But it's a real good. It is one of Eno's better albums, I think. I have to separate the times when he goes and he does vocal albums with rhythms and more pop-oriented song things from his instrumental works, and then I guess his instrumental works, a lot of them, if not most of them, are ambient. And then there's this other category, which I think this would fall into. That's there's a lot of elements of his ambient work in here, and indeed there's no drums in here, but the pieces are all shorter and a bit more thematic, and it does work. It does work. His brother Roger Eno plays on here as well as Daniel Lanois. Basically, I think just the 3 of them. I don't see any other musicians on there. This is definitely one that, if you're into Eno, you have to have. There's nothing difficult or dark about it. It's certainly, for a lot of people that aren't particularly, maybe really heavily into listening to a single ambient piece of his that goes on for 60 minutes, this is definitely something more accessible. But yeah, it really is a good album. But strangely enough, I can remember the day that I bought this. And driving home from the store with it. One of those things when you got the particular store that I bought this at wasn't the one that was actually real close to my house. There was 2 roughly I would say not even in the area. The second one was more than a half hour away. This is one of the albums that I can recall driving home with really wondering what it sounded like, based on the fact that I was familiar with Eno, but I saw there were shorter pieces, And with Daniel Lanois and his brother involved, I didn't know what to expect because I hadn't heard anything by Roger Eno at that time or Daniel Lanois on his own. So I'm not going to do another poll because next time I come on, I probably won't have anything to talk about either. So I'll do another batch of vinyl polls and we'll see what comes out. Halloween's about a week away, I guess, roughly a week away, and I'm digging it. The guys on the back shelf are digging it. Ghosty here is digging it, and so I'm gonna go, and I'll be back. In a few days, I'll do another vinyl poll, and that'll be our last one for Halloween, I guess. See you soon, guys.
Tales from the Garage is brought to you by Monster Out. Just spray it once a day throughout your home and keeps all monsters away, even invisible ones. Say goodbye to ghoulies, goblins, gremlins, mummies, vampires, and the living dead. Not effective on witches, chicken men, or rhino girls. And by Smoky brand cigarettes. 9 out of 10 doctors recommend smoky cigarettes to their patients. Remember, gals love a smoky man. Smoky, the key to great taste. Tune in next time for more
Tales from the Garage.